Hi, this is Ashio, and today we're going to talk about Appleseed. It's one of these old classic manga that came out in the 80s. Everybody's heard of it. Has everybody read it? I'm not so sure. Maybe you've seen one or two of the anime shows or the films. But the manga itself is a lot to digest, so let's kind of get into it. Appleseed is about the world has kind of come to an end. World War III has come and gone. The world's been destroyed, and they kind of need to build it again from scratch. Some people are holding on to the old ways, but there are new cities and new civilizations also coming out. So we got two main protagonists here. We got Dunin here and Briareos here, and they live in what's termed the Badlands. Badlands are indeed the Badlands. They're outside of society. They're not under any kind of political movement or society or anything. They're just out and left to fend for themselves. They're military trained. They can look after themselves. And they get recruited and brought back into like an utopia called Olympus. But like all utopias, nothing's quite as it seems. So over time we find out that Olympus is essentially a synthetically made society from the ground up. Not just the science advances with the buildings, but also the people. It turns out 80% of the people are known as bioroids. They're synthetically made humans. The bioroids are essentially deemed perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. They won't rebel, and they can be synthetically grown and made into making the perfect society. So why would you have humans who are going to rebel and have their own opinions and leanings in a society which is so-called perfect? And these are the questions that Appleseed starts to ask, doesn't really show you any answers. I actually took a couple of notes when I was reading like volume 1 and 2, and it's like all of the notes I made were down to the themes, and nothing was to do with the story particularly. It's just asking lots of big questions. What is society? What are politicians for? How much control can they have over people? And what kind of freedoms are you allowed to give these people before they're deemed terrorists? And it gets a little bit muddled in what it's trying to say. Not least because our heroes kind of change alliances every 5 pages. So they become some kind of specialist SWAT team. And they like arrest one of their old friends. Then they say, oh, wait a minute, this is bad. Let's go break them out of jail. And then we'll go and do something else. It's a little bit to and fro, and it doesn't really give you all the pieces to work it out together. It's a very dense read. There's a lot of information on the page. The artwork's incredible. The artwork is really detailed, really nice, and it evolves throughout all the volumes. So volume 1 is very nice, properly hand-drawn, and later volumes he kind of develops his like toning techniques, and it's a little bit more refined. But throughout, it doesn't matter what volume you pick up, they all look really, really, really good. So if you want to read Appleseed on like a superficial level, it has like mechas, it has like people in like armoured suits fighting each other, blowing things up, shooting, exploding, knocking down buildings. It's all cool and it's all fun times. When it gets into the political side of things, it's completely dense. So I said that before, the artwork's very detailed and there's a lot on the page. There's also, when the talking's going on, there's a lot of information and there's a lot of like side notes, asterisks. There's a lot of filling of gaps of information that some of it we're expected to know, some of it we're supposed to piece together ourselves. And maybe I'm just a bit too stupid to read a series like this, but it's asking a little bit too much effort that I'm willing to put into it. Like, don't get me wrong, Appleseed is good. It is good. I would give it like a solid 7 out of 10 or something like this. But it's hard to address like concerns and like areas where you think might need to be a little bit more improved without people thinking you're automatically saying that a manga is bad. It is good. Don't get me wrong. I'll say that probably volumes 1 and 2 are the easier 2 to get into. They're kind of more refined. They know what they're doing. They kind of got a bit of a story to tell. You get a beginning, middle and end, and that's kind of it. If you watch the very old 80s anime, the anime is kind of based loosely on volume 2, but volume 2 does its own thing as well. It's kind of cool. Volumes 3 and 4, however, where are they? They are down here. I don't know, it kind of starts to lose its way because it's set up this whole big convoluted plot, and you're supposed to know all of the different political backgrounds of like modern history, and then you're supposed to understand how they've been advanced into a sci-fi environment, and then you get all the like the classical references. It mentions a lot of like mythological creatures, things are named after certain things, certain phrases are used referring to classical characters. And you know when you're watching like a Metal Gear Solid cutscene and it just goes on a massive tangent for half an hour and then you come back to where you were, and half of that information really wasn't necessary? Appleseed is very much like this. And as a reader, you're kind of expected to take everything in first time round. And when it appears eventually, maybe 80 pages later, you expect to instantly remember what that was about. And it's like, oh yeah, that was that guy. Let's shoot him now because of all the reasons that I've explained so long ago. And it's not even me as a reader who's getting a bit distracted. The author himself, Masamune Shirow, he's also getting a little bit distracted. So there'll be some kind of political intrigue or a discussion on some kind of Greek myth or something. But on the visuals, you'll just get some naked girls being massaged. And I'm like, is this to do with the plot? Are you paying attention to what you're writing, or are you just putting some eye candy because you're not interested in what you're writing yourself? So we're up to volume 4 now. There are a couple of side books, but this video is just going to focus on the main 4. I would say the first 2 are the best 2, and the second 2, if you're a big fan. So Appleseed's trying to do several things at once. It's trying to be a big sci-fi action, post-apocalyptic, anti-utopia kind of thing. And it does that quite well. It's also trying to be a little bit philosophical and political, which it kind of does okay, but it doesn't really fill the gaps. It kind of does a lot of talking, and only half of it's kind of followed up on. It's like food for thought, and it's maybe what the author was on his mind on that day, but it doesn't really feed back into the story, aside from being quite cynical. And it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because if we don't like the answers that we come up with, we're just going to show up with a giant robot and blow it up anyway. That's kind of how a lot of Appleseed seems to work. Each volume is kind of self-contained, and with that it means that by the end of every volume, the original status quo is basically fulfilled. It doesn't really have a big, huge overarching plot, and what I mean is, between volume 1 and volume 4, the character dynamics are basically the same. Dune and Brios, they kind of develop their relationship into being more romantic, whereas before they were just basically like good friends kind of thing. Just a reminder, I'm not saying it's bad. It's good at what it's trying to do, but it's down to the reader. I like to have this little tagline where I say, not every manga is for every reader. Personally, I find it's okay, but I think it's a little bit too much sometimes. Too much information, too much detail. I don't need to know exactly what kind of bullets this person's using to blow up that robot. It doesn't interest me. Unless you're really into like your mecha or your military tactics or like guns and stuff like this, it's not relevant to the plot. It doesn't really need to be told. Whereas he will tell you, he'll give a little sidebar filling it all out. And it just kind of breaks up the flow with all this too much information. You know, too much can be a good thing. Less can be more. Remember, I still think it's good. So my advice, if you wanted to get into Appleseed, I would say check out the old 80s anime. It's just like an hour long, and it kind of gives you a bit more of a simplified approach on what Appleseed wants to do. And if that takes your fancy, then that's cool. You can get into the manga and check that out. If you just want to see really detailed kind of cyber suits beating the shit out of each other, go for it. Just go for it. So Masamune Shirow was really popular back in the day, and there are going to be a few more of his manga that I'm going to have to check out as we get through my yearly top 10 videos. But Appleseed was the first one to come out. It's a pretty good place to start, actually. I think by the time he got around to like Ghost in the Shell, he's kind of refined what he wanted to do, the balance between his mechs and his philosophy and his action. So Ghost in the Shell, I think, is probably a better one-stop shop. But maybe not the sequels, less the sequels. Appleseed is better for a bigger overall, and it's more consistent in tone. Whereas Ghost in the Shell, I feel it kind of got worse the more it went on. The first volume's good. I don't know. I'll have to review it another time. But Appleseed is fine if you want really detailed, plot-heavy, sci-fi, sometimes action. And that is it. That is Appleseed. This is Usho signing off, and hopefully I will see you next time.